Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion. This is a poetry discussion which will, of course, be in two separate playlists here on the channel. It will be in the poetry discussion playlist, obviously. It will also be in the Emily Dickinson poetry discussion playlist, a playlist exclusively dedicated to the greatest, most magnificent, and incredible poet of all time, Emily Dickinson. So, what we have here is a poem that is not one of the widely circulated Emily Dickinson poems, but it's a poem that is focused on one of the small conundrums of life that I think is extremely underrated. And if you get into something like Stoic philosophy, they talk about something like this, something near this, something approaching this, a whole lot. And I think that Stoicism is one of our most ancient philosophies that still lives today. And there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason that Stoicism is still so widely practiced because it's effective, because it is meaningful, because it adds to people's lives. And so, when faced with one of these types of poems that you've got the thing that Stoicism says, and this poem is attacking it from an odd angle, I think it's definitely worth talking about. The poem itself is known by the first line, "Her final summer was it." Her final summer was it, and yet we guessed it not. If tenderer industriousness pervaded her, we thought. A further force of life developed from within, when death lit all the shortness up, and made the hurry plain. We wondered at our blindness, when nothing was to see but her Carrara guidepost and our stupidity. When, duller than our dullness, the busy darling lay, so busy was she finishing, so leisurely were we. So, what I think is what's happening here is that obviously we get a little bit from that first stanza that our speaker has a friend or a special someone who means something to them that is past, and past in an untimely fashion, past before their time. What is the old phrase? Live fast and leave a beautiful corpse. This is someone whose death was not foreseen by our speaker, or apparently their entire group of friends or family or whatever, because there is the constant we, right? So leisurely were we. Uh, Her final summer was it, and yet we guessed it not. If tenderer industriousness pervaded her, we thought. So this person is at the person who has passed is at the center of a web of connection, be that family, be that friends, be that workers, co-workers, pardon me, be that some web, be that some type of relationship between all of the we's involved. And though Emily Dickinson might be one of the only poets who could have pulled off this poem from the sort of standpoint, from the viewpoint of the one who has passed, we have many poems from Emily Dickinson where it is taking place from a person who has passed. Was that always this person? If this person indeed was real, is Emily Dickinson putting herself in those shoes all of those other times, and here still remaining one of the individuals who is alive? But whatever the case, Emily Dickinson could have told this poem from the viewpoint of the deceased, but chose not to. And though I don't think it's necessary to ask why, I think it is necessary to delve into why. It's a much different poem that way. It's a poem that leaves space for the philosophy to become emergent. If this poem were told from the opposite viewpoint, from the viewpoint of the deceased, it would not leave quite the same. It would be more moralizing, in fact, if we did the philosophizing there, right? It would be the moralizing would be heavy-handed, would be overt, would be over the top, perhaps. Should I have lived my life better? Should I have taken more advantage of the days that I had left? Did I know? Because we do not have the perspective from the speaker. The speaker could have known and not made it clear. We had a case like this just a few years ago with Norm Macdonald. Norm Macdonald, the world-renowned comedian, he died of cancer. No one knew he was sick. And that was the... He would say things that in retrospect made it obvious. He would say things like, "Oh, if I were to know I was going, I wouldn't tell anyone." That would make it fake, right? Norm Macdonald didn't want anything fake. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted to live the authentic life for all of the life that he had left. If someone made a point not to see you, but if they knew you were going, would have made the effort, well, what was that effort worth? But the questions I think that this poem raises are so widely circulated, are so commonplace with this, if you delve into this type of thought, that they're almost cliche. But again, there's something about cliche which should be fairly obvious. If it is cliche, that means it's widely circulated. Widely circulated thoughts are circulated for a reason. There is something to them. So the number one thing, if you were to pass, would you want to know the day? If you could tap into something nether realmy and say, "Oh, where's my expiration date?" There it is. That's the day I check out. Would you want to know? Would you really? There are several cases in literature, philosophy, biography, where people have made the point to give themselves an expiration date. If by December 13th, 2037, I am not XYZ, I am going to go ahead and check out, if you catch my drift. And in the meantime, what they have noticed, they had been hating life, languishing in life. They had not accomplished anything that they wanted to accomplish. They had gotten lost in the quagmire of the day-to-day. Once they set that date, and they put in motion those things, they realized that by the time they got to that date, maybe they weren't everything that they had wanted to be. Maybe they weren't everything that they had set their self out to be. Maybe they were not everything that had struck them as necessary to go on living. But when they got there, they still decided that life was more worth living than had it been. And so, having checked their own expiration date, pushed it out. Now, the danger with this is, if you know the date and you live in that way, what if you get to that date and you realize you want to keep going? Would you want to know the day? I think odds are you would not, but I think some of us would. And I think that is a question worth asking ourselves. To me, there have been several moments in my life where, you start thinking, if X, Y, and Z were taken from me, how would I live? What would I do? So I think everybody has been in position at one time or another where something happens at work and you fear you might lose your job for whatever reason. Maybe it's not your fault. Maybe it is your fault. Maybe you had a bad day. Maybe something just happened to you and you handled it in the wrong way. And everybody's been in that place, right? Where they think, okay, Monday might come and I might not have a job. For me, I spend that whole weekend. What would I do? Could Could I live off of my other sources of income? How long could I live off of my other sources of income? What if I did X, Y, Z? What if this, that, and this happened? Well, why don't you live that way anyhow? Right? So for me, there are a couple alternative revenue streams that I have outside of work. And there was a point where I was sort of so angry that I thought maybe I would quit my job. And it became one of these things, well, could you live off of the things you do outside of work? And the answer was kind of no, right? So what would it take? And you kind of do that math. And then Monday comes, the proverbial Monday comes, and I didn't lose my job. I didn't feel the desire to quit. I didn't step away from the working world. But I said, these things that I'm doing on the side, they do make a little bit of money. I am able to, and I enjoy them. They're my hobbies. And I make money doing my hobbies. Why don't I see what it would take to do that full time? So I kicked up the productivity. And no, I still wasn't able to do it full time, but it got me to a much better place with those incomes to where if I did lose my job, if I did decide to quit, all of a sudden, yeah, I could float for a little while. I could do these other things for a little while. And you know what happens at that point? You start looking around your job and thinking, well, this isn't so bad. I was just putting a whole lot of pressure on this thing. I was putting a whole lot of stress in my life because I felt like I had to have this thing. If I did not have to have this thing, I could just take all the pressure off while I'm here, still be productive while I'm here, still work while I'm here, but not have to put all of the emphasis on conserving this job. And all of a sudden, your life gets better in a lot of areas. One of the other things, and the next 2 points actually are things which are you can find in Steve Jobs. If you look up Steve Jobs' graduation speech, Steve Jobs did a graduation speech for, I think it was Yale, Harvard, Notre Dame, one of these institutions, and it was after he had been told that he had cancer. Cancer ultimately ended up taking Steve Jobs' life. But he asked a whole lot of questions in the meantime. And one of the quotes that really he said got him motivated to do all the things with Apple before he knew any of these terminal things about himself was the question, the statement, I'm sorry. And I don't remember where he got it. If you live every day as if it were your last, someday you will surely be correct. Now, that sounds throwaway, but the profundity of that statement is not quite so disposable. If you live every day as if it were your last, someday you will surely be right. Which means if you live every day as if it were your last, spending every moment present with the people around you, that's going to greatly improve your life. Like, that's one of the things, sort of like in the example that I gave for myself. Spending every day as if it were your last makes you present in all of the decisions that you make. So if you live every day that way, and someday you are correct, that final day will be much better for it. And the other thing that he said in that speech, which is definitely worth considering, and I'm not going to quote it directly, but it was something like this. You have to wake up and look at your life every day. Wake up and think to yourself, if this were my last day on earth, would I want to spend it the way I'm spending it? And if for too many days in a row, the answer is no, then you have to change something. Now, in the ever-evolving event that that day is not your last, you have the ability to change incrementally. If I wake up and I look at my life and I thought, well, if this was the last day that I had on earth, would I want to spend it this way? And the answer were no for too many days in a row, I could change something. That something then gets changed. And I think, well, no, I still wouldn't want to live it this way. We get to change something else. We get to constantly maximize. There is a style of gameplay called min-max, minimum, maximum, the minimum amount for the maximum result. That is one of the things that I have taken from watching gaming during my planning time. Min-max. What is the minimum input for the maximum output? And in that case, what you can do, if you find the minimum input for the maximum output, say, of money, right? So there's that book called the 4-Hour Work Week. So if you could earn the same amount of money in 4 hours that you currently earn in your 40-hour work week, well, what would happen if you still worked 40 hours a week? You'd earn 10 times as much money. What would happen if you got out of 2 hours of socialization what you could get out of 20 minutes of socialization? Now, I know that math isn't quite right, but I'm not going to do the conversion on the fly. So 20 minutes of socialization, 20 minutes spent with someone in deep conversation is much more fulfilling than 2 hours of the two of you sitting together watching The Wire. Is that a TV show? I don't even know anymore. The two of you sitting together in silence watching The Wire for 2 hours gives you the same amount of benefit as 20 minutes speaking deeply with this person. Well, why not spend 2 hours speaking deeply with that person? That is a game of min-max, minimum input, maximum output. So you could have, if you found that route, that 4-hour work week, 10 times your money. Out of 20 minutes, get the same amount with someone as 2 hours. Guess what you could do in a 168-hour week? Guess what you could do in that place? You would definitely be the person who, whenever you passed, would leave people thinking these types of thoughts about you. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you enjoy what I do here, hitting the like button really helps me out on this channel. It tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel. Poetry, every Monday. There are short stories, novel read-alongs. I'm currently working through a read-along for Sylvia Plath. Poem by poem, we will be going through Sylvia Plath. So if you do find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more, because as always, did you hear that? I hope to have you back for the next one. Something exploded outside of my apartment.